The starving stranger entered my bakery 5 minutes before closing, placed an antique gold watch on the counter, and asked how much bread it would buy. "None," I said. His face hardened. "The watch is worth more than this shop. Probably. But soup and bread are free when someone looks like he has not eaten in 3 days. I was right about the hunger, and wrong about everything else. His name was Nico Caruso, the Mafia boss who secretly owned my bakery, my apartment, and every building on Bellflower Street. My name is Rosie Bennett. I was 30 chubby flour-covered and 1 late payment away from losing the bakery my father built. The stranger wore a torn cashmere coat, had bruises around one wrist, and kept checking the window. I served him tomato soup, 2 rolls, and the last slice of almond cake. "Why free?" he asked. "Because hunger is not improved by paperwork. You do not know me. Hungry people chew the same." He ate slowly at first, then, like a man remembering food, could disappear. Outside, a black SUV stopped at the curb. The stranger moved behind the counter. "Do you have another exit?" "Through the kitchen." "Use it. This is my bakery." "Not tonight." 2 men entered wearing city inspection jackets. They asked whether I had seen a thief. Nico pressed 1 finger to his lips. I looked at their spotless shoes. Real inspectors visiting bakeries carry flour dust before reaching the second room. "Only customer tonight was Mrs. Green's poodle," I said. 1 man looked over my body and laughed. "You ate the evidence," I smiled. "Would you like to inspect the oven?" He declined. People who mock a plus-size baker rarely imagine she controls fire. They left, but the SUV remained. I took Nico through the flour storeroom into the apartment upstairs. My grandmother was asleep in the back bedroom. "You can stay until they go," I said. "Then you leave." He studied family photographs lining the stairs. Bennett Bakery. Open since 1988. My father started it. The new property company wants triple rent. "Which company?" "Bellflower Holdings. Invisible people with visible lawyers." Nico knew the name. He hit it badly. At midnight, the SUV drove away. He slept on the kitchen floor instead of the sofa because he wanted sight of both doors. In the morning, he fixed my broken mixer with a butter knife. "You repair bakery equipment?" I asked. "I understand machines that stop when overloaded." Was that a comment about me? No. His answer came fast and serious. "Your body is not a broken machine." I had not expected that from a bruised stranger. He asked to work for breakfast. I needed help preparing orders, so I gave him an apron. It read, "Kiss the Baker," and fit badly across his shoulders. For 6 hours, the feared Nico Caruso kneaded dough, burned croissants, and carried flour sacks while pretending he had no idea why men in black cars searched the neighborhood. Customers adored him. Mrs. Green asked whether I finally hired a husband. "Temporary labor," I said. "Cruel employer," he replied. At noon, 3 black cars surrounded the bakery. Men entered and dropped to 1 knee. My mixing bowl slipped from my hands. "Don Caruso, the oldest man, said we thought you were dead." Nico removed the ridiculous apron. Authority settled over him like a second coat. "Not today." He explained that his cousin Marco had drugged him during a council dinner and arranged the staged theft. Nico escaped before being transported to a river warehouse. The men searching Bellflower Street worked for Marco. Nico's loyal guards traced him through the antique watch signal embedded by his father. I looked at the watch still beside my cash register. "You used my bakery as a hiding place. I entered because the lights were on, and Bellflower Holdings silence. You own it. My company acquired the street last year. I slapped the rent notice onto his chest. Then you ate free food from a woman you are evicting. I did not approve this increase. Your signature is printed at the bottom. It is electronic. My landlord is still your name." Anger replaced every softer feeling from the night before. Nico ordered his men outside. "Rosie, I did not know. That is what wealthy owners say when ignorance is profitable." He offered to cancel my rent. "And the tailor, florist, barber, and families upstairs, I will review every lease." Review means we wait, while lawyers charge us. Then, What do you want? The same rent agreement your father signed with mine. Renovations in exchange for long-term stability. No eviction without independent review. Tenants get first option if you sell. You came prepared. We have been fighting you for months. Nico signed a temporary freeze on every eviction before leaving. I did not thank him for stopping harm his company created. That afternoon, Marco Caruso appeared in the bakery carrying flowers. He was handsome, polished, and falsely gentle. My cousin frightened you, he said. I can protect this street from him. By tripling rent again, Marco claimed Nico planned to demolish Bellflower Street for a casino hotel. He showed me architectural drawings bearing Nico's approval. The bakery would become a service entrance. If the documents were real, Nico had lied. If false, Marco wanted tenants to riot against him. I kept a copy. That night, someone set fire to the tailor shop next door. I woke when smoke entered our apartment. Nico's temporary security guards evacuated the block, but flames reached my bakery roof. We formed a line with hoses until firefighters arrived. An elderly tenant was trapped above the florist. Nico climbed the exterior fire ladder himself and carried her down. Marco watched from across the street, believing no one saw him. I did. Fire investigators found accelerant in bread delivery cans stolen from my alley. The evidence pointed to my bakery. Marco intended to frame me as an angry tenant who destroyed the street to stop redevelopment. Nico's counsel demanded my arrest. He refused. You trusted me after one bowl of soup, he said. I can manage one suspicious gasoline can. We examined the architectural plans. My father had taught drafting before opening the bakery. He always showed me how old paper reveals alterations. Nico's signature was scanned, but one street measurement used meters while Caruso architects used feet. The drawing came from a European firm owned by Marco's fiancée. More importantly, it showed a utility tunnel beneath the bakery that did not exist on city plans. My father's original blueprints revealed the tunnel belonged to an abandoned subway entrance. During Prohibition, the Caruso family used it to move goods. Marco wanted the street demolished to reach a vault hidden below. Nico's father had sealed the vault after discovering it contained evidence of corrupt judges and family payments. Your father and mine knew each other, I said. Nico found an old photograph of them standing beside the bakery oven. My father had built a false brick chamber to conceal the tunnel entrance. That was why Bellflower Holdings bought the street. Nico's late father wanted to protect the evidence without telling Marco. After his death, the purpose disappeared inside corporate files. Ignorance had nearly completed the betrayal. We opened the chamber at midnight with tenants as witnesses. Inside the vault were ledgers, bonds, and recordings proving Marco stole from the Caruso companies and paid officials to approve the casino development. Before we could remove everything, Marco's men blocked both tunnel exits. Give me the ledger, Marco called, and the tenants walk away. Nico reached for his gun. I stopped him. The tunnel ran beneath my commercial oven's old exhaust system. I sent the baker's apprentice upstairs through a flour delivery hatch and told him to heat every oven. Warm air rose through the tunnel, activating antique fire vents along the street. Their iron covers opened directly beneath Marco's vehicles. Tenants emerged through separate grates while his men guarded only the main exits. Mrs. Green climbed out beside the flower shop, holding 2 ledgers beneath her coat. Nobody searches an old woman carrying a poodle, she said. Police and federal investigators arrived because the florist live-streamed the entire confrontation. Marco was arrested while attempting to burn the remaining records. Nico's counsel removed him. The casino plan collapsed. Bellflower Street survived, but I refused Nico's offer to give me the building. Ownership without a plan becomes the same problem later. We created a tenant cooperative, recovered bonds, funded repairs. Bellflower Holdings transferred majority ownership to residents while retaining a limited commercial share that paid for maintenance. Nico signed the agreement in my bakery beneath the watch he once tried to exchange for bread. How much bread would it buy now, he asked. Still none. You are a terrible capitalist. You are a recovering landlord. Our relationship developed through rent meetings, reconstruction, and arguments over whether his guards could occupy 2 bakery tables without ordering. He learned to make respectable croissants. I learned that behind his control was a man raised to believe needing food shelter or another person created weakness. One evening he arrived after closing without guards. "Hungry?" I asked. "Yes." I served soup and bread. This time he paid the same price as everyone else. At the street reopening, Nico revealed a bronze plaque honoring both our fathers. It described the vault, the fire, and the tenants who preserved the evidence. No line called him savior. "You left your name small," I said. The baker negotiated font size. Smart woman. A year later, he proposed beside the old oven. He did not offer a diamond first. He placed the cooperative agreement on the counter, showing the bakery's ownership could never transfer through marriage. "Your street remains yours," he said. "Now, will you consider sharing a home with me?" I said yes, after making him finish the morning bread order. The night Nico Caruso entered my bakery, he looked like a starving stranger with nothing but a gold watch. By morning, I learned he owned everything around me. Months later, he learned owning buildings did not make him owner of the people who filled them. The chubby baker fed him because hunger deserved mercy. She loved him only after he understood that mercy was not surrender. Bellflower Street remained ours for 4 peaceful years. Peace did not mean silence. The florist fought with the barber about delivery parking. Mrs. Green chaired cooperative meetings as if commanding a navy. Nico continued to occupy the corner table with security men who had learned to buy coffee before discussing threats. I woke at 4 every morning, kneaded dough while the city was dark, and measured success by the line outside when the first loaves left the oven. Then, on the anniversary of the cooperative, a 12-year-old girl entered my bakery, carrying a stale roll in a clear evidence bag. "My mother ate this and died," she said. Every conversation stopped. The roll bore my bakery's stamped paper, my cinnamon leaf seal, and a batch number from the previous morning. I had made that batch myself. The girl's name was Ivy Mercer. Her mother, Dana, worked for the county recorder and had collapsed on a subway platform after eating breakfast. Police analysis found foxglove in the dough. By noon, health inspectors closed the bakery. By evening, news vans blocked both ends of the street. Someone leaked photographs of Nico entering my kitchen after midnight, and the story became irresistible. The chubby baker who married a Mafia boss had poisoned a public employee to protect her husband's property scheme. Residents who had once defended me stared at their cupboards as if every loaf might contain a confession. Nico ordered his men to find the supplier. I ordered them away from the bakery. A frightened neighborhood will not trust evidence collected by armed men who answer to my husband. A frightened husband does not trust strangers to protect his wife. Then be frightened beside me. Do not become the reason they stop talking. Ivy refused to leave. She placed a second object on the counter, a brass bread token stamped with a bellflower. Dana had been clutching it when she died. My father used identical tokens during the years customers could not afford cash. I had melted most of them after his death, but 12 were missing. The reverse side of Ivy's token held tiny numbers scratched by hand, 1438. The cooperative's old property map used those numbers for parcel block and foundation column. The column stood beneath the bakery. Police had already searched the vault we discovered during the casino fight. They found nothing except cooperative records. I knew the bakery better than they did. At midnight, with Ivy safely upstairs beside Mrs. Green and 2 detectives observing, I removed the stone at column 14. Behind it lay a narrow tin box containing a photograph of my father with Dana Mercer, a key and a letter addressed to me. Before I could read it, the basement lights died. Someone fired through the rear window. Nico pushed me behind the flour bins and took the bullet across his shoulder. The attacker fled through the old fire vent. Nico bled onto the floor, where he once stood starving. "This is becoming a family tradition," he said through clenched teeth. "Do not make jokes until I know the bullet missed your arrogance. Impossible. Too large a target. The wound was clean, but the shot told us the box mattered more than the poison accusation. My father's letter explained that Bellflower Street contained not 1 hidden asset, but 2. The first was the vault of ledgers we found. The second was the land itself. A century earlier, 14 immigrant families had pooled money to buy the block. A corrupt banker recorded only one family as owner, then transferred the property through companies that eventually became Bellflower Holdings. The cooperative agreement had protected tenants, but if the original trust deed surfaced, descendants of all 14 families would own equal shares. My father and Dana had located a reference to the deed in county archives. Before they found the original, Nico's father asked them to stop. He feared Marco would murder the descendants and consolidate their claims. My father hid the investigation inside bakery ledgers. Dana resumed it after Marco's conviction. She believed the original deed was stored beneath a former mission called St. Orsola, demolished to build the central courthouse. The key in the box opened something inside that building. Nico read the letter in silence. If the deed existed, his company's remaining share might be invalid. So might every lease, mortgage, and cooperative transfer made during the past 100 years. You could lose everything, I said, if it was never mine. Losing it is the first honest thing I can do. It was the answer I needed from my husband, but someone else expected him to choose differently. The next morning, prosecutors produced a message from Nico, ordering Dana to stop digging. It came from his encrypted phone. They arrested him for conspiracy and questioned me about poison. The timing was precise, with Nico jailed and my bakery closed. The cooperative's bylaws placed temporary authority in the hands of the treasurer, Paul Vescari. Paul owned the hardware store, smiled at every meeting, and had argued hardest for resident control. His first act was to announce an emergency offer from a developer called Civic Renewal Partners. The company would purchase the endangered block, pay legal costs, and allow residents to remain at reduced rent. Half the street considered it salvation. I recognized the language from Marco's old casino proposal. Same promises, different stationery. Paul denied any connection. He reminded everyone that my husband was accused of murder and I was accused of poisoning a mother. Bellflower cannot be governed by romance, he said. For once, Paul is right, I answered. So let us govern it with records. The cooperative granted me 48 hours before the sale vote. Ivy came with me to the courthouse. She wore her mother's oversized raincoat and carried a notebook full of questions adults tried to avoid. Dana's key opened no public door. We searched benches, cabinets, and the brass memorial plaques transferred from St. Ursula. At the center of the rotunda stood a carved wooden relief of immigrants sharing bread. One figure held a loaf marked with 14 cuts. I inserted the key into the 14th cut. A compartment opened behind the carving. It contained an empty leather tube and a fresh note, "Too slow, Baker." Security footage showed Dana entering the courthouse the week before her death, finding the tube and leaving with it hidden beneath her coat. The deed had reached her. Whoever poisoned her had not found where she moved it. Ivy remembered her mother taking her on a strange tour of Bellflower Street that Sunday. Dana bought a carnation, sharpened a pencil at the barber shop, rang the bakery bell, and asked Ivy to count windows. It seemed like a game. I realized she was teaching the route without writing it down. 14 businesses, 14 descendants. At each stop, Dana left something small. The florist found a button taped beneath a vase. The barber found a strip of blue cloth inside his old razor case. Mrs. Green found a wooden bead in her poodle's treat jar. Each object represented a family crest shown on the courthouse relief. When arranged in street order, the objects formed a memory code. Ivy supplied the words her mother repeated: flower blade, bell, glass, fire thread. The final sequence pointed not to a building, but to my father's oldest recipe: 14 family bread, a dense holiday loaf nobody bought anymore. The recipe required the dough to be folded around a ceramic bean. My father's ledger recorded one loaf from the final batch as unsold and preserved. Bread could not survive 20 years, but a ceramic bean could. I had kept his display loaf sealed in resin above the bakery door because it was the last thing he baked. Health inspectors had removed it as potential evidence. We reached the laboratory minutes before Paul's attorney obtained an order transferring all seized bakery property to Civic Renewal as part of its proposed purchase. The display loaf had already been loaded into a courier van. Nico's men could have stopped it, but I had forbidden them. So Ivy and I followed in my flour truck, a vehicle that shuddered above 40 miles an hour and smelled permanently of yeast. The courier did not drive toward the developer's office. He drove to the river incinerator. At a red light, Ivy jumped from the truck before I could stop her and slapped Dana's evidence bag against the van window. The driver looked at the dead woman's poisoned roll and panicked. He accelerated into the loading yard, where police waiting on my call blocked the gate. We recovered the resin loaf. Inside, the ceramic bean was no deed, only a microfilm strip showing a letter from Nico's father to Paul Vascari's father. The two men had known about the trust. Paul's father was one of the 14 descendants. He agreed to hide the deed in exchange for secret control of future development deals. Paul inherited both the claim and the betrayal, but the microfilm did not prove Dana's killer or locate the deed. Paul called an emergency vote that evening. Reporters packed the street. Residents were exhausted and afraid of losing their homes. Civic Renewal offered each family more money than most had seen in their lives. I could not tell people to reject safety based on faith in me. I served bread at the meeting because people make better decisions when fear is not the only thing in their stomachs. Ivy sat beside Dana's empty chair. Before voting began, she asked to speak. My mother told me property records are stories powerful people force paper to remember, she said. She died because somebody wanted the paper to forget us again. Paul expressed sympathy and reached for the ballot box. Ivy placed the poisoned roll on his table. He recoiled before anyone mentioned what it contained. It was a small reaction, but I saw it. So did Nico. Watching the live stream from jail, he called my phone through his attorney. Paul knew what was in the bag. I delayed the vote by announcing the bread tasted wrong. Everyone stared at me. I had baked it from my father's 14 family recipe, following every line except the ceramic bean. Yet the loaves produced a hollow sound when tapped. My father's measurements included too much flour for the listed water. For years, I assumed it was an old man's mistake. It was an instruction. Dry dough cracks along fold lines. I broke a loaf. The interior separated into 14 chambers. When arranged like the street map, the chambers pointed to the community oven installed at the cooperative's reopening. Nico had unveiled it. My father had designed its stone base before his death, and Paul supervised its construction. We opened the base while cameras rolled. Behind the fire brick stood the original trust deed wrapped in oilcloth, along with Dana's phone. She had found both and hidden them there because the oven belonged to everyone, not one owner. Her final video showed Paul meeting her in the bakery alley. He demanded the deed. She refused. He handed her a roll from a box carrying my seal, then followed her to the subway to make certain she ate it. Dana sensed danger and activated the recording. Paul did not realize the phone remained in the oven because he believed she had left it in the courthouse tube. He overturned the ballot table and ran. The florist locked the east gate. The barber blocked the west with his chair. Mrs. Green released her poodle, who bit Paul's ankle with historic enthusiasm. Police arrested him before Nico's men moved. Civic Renewal's accounts led directly to Marco's remaining network. The encrypted message from Nico had been sent using a cloned device created by Paul's cousin, a technician at the county jail. Nico was released. The poison charges against me were dismissed after investigators found Paul's rented kitchen counterfeit bakery paper and foxglove plants. None of that brought Dana back. Ivy did not need us to turn her mother into a clue that solved our problem. She needed adults to acknowledge the woman who packed lunches sang badly in the car and stayed late at the recorder's office because paper mattered to people without guards. We held Dana's memorial in the street. Every business placed one empty chair outside. Nico stood behind Ivy, not in front of her. The trust deed created 14 equal ownership lines, but a century of descendants made the legal picture nearly impossible. Some families had hundreds of heirs, others had none. Corporate lawyers predicted decades of litigation. Nico proposed purchasing every claim. I told him he had learned nothing. Ivy proposed a better answer. The descendants could place their claims into a permanent land trust. The cooperative would own the buildings. The trust would own the ground. Neither could sell without a public vote and independent review. Families who wanted money could receive a fair settlement without forcing neighbors to move. We spent 18 months locating descendants across 5 countries. Some thought the letter was a scam. Some wanted fortunes the street could not pay. We opened the bakery basement and showed them the vault, the vents, the ledgers, and the marks their ancestors carved into stone. Most accepted membership in the trust. Nico surrendered Bellflower Holdings' final commercial share. "You will own nothing here," his attorney warned. Nico looked toward the bakery. "That is not true." "Your wife is not property," I said. I meant my unpaid coffee tab. "That belongs to me, and it is substantial." Ivy moved into the apartment above Mrs. Green, while her aunt completed a custody petition. She worked at the bakery after school, though I refused to let her operate the mixer until she stopped treating safety instructions as personal insults. She created a small round loaf with 14 folds and named it Dana's Record. Every sale funded free legal help for tenants facing fraudulent deeds. On the first day we sold it, the line stretched around the block. A television reporter asked whether the bread tasted different because it represented justice. Ivy answered, "No. It tastes good because Clara made me redo it 6 times. Nico's shoulder healed, leaving a scar he considered heroic. I reminded him he had been shot beside a bag of rye flour while wearing slippers at night after the ovens cooled. He sometimes admitted the arrest. Frightened him more than the bullet. He had spent his life believing power meant he could force open any door. In jail, he depended on the very public procedures he once viewed as obstacles. "Your rules saved me," he said. "Not my rules. Shared rules. Mine would be just another favor." The distinction became the center of his new life. He converted the remaining Caruso companies into employee-owned firms, sold businesses that could not survive transparent books, and testified about officials Marco had paid. Old allies called him weak. One arrived at the bakery and warned that a boss who gave away ownership would soon have no one left to obey him. Nico handed the man an apron and pointed to 40 holiday orders. "Then it is fortunate I need people willing to work with me." The man left. Nico completed the orders himself badly. Years passed. Bellflower Street changed without disappearing. The flower shop became a flower shop and art studio. The barber hired his granddaughter, who painted one wall purple despite his protests. Mrs. Green died at 94 and left her cooperative share to the tenant legal fund, with a separate clause granting her poodle unlimited bakery biscuits. Ivy studied public records and returned as the youngest elected county recorder. On her first day, she displayed Dana's brass bread token beneath glass. She also required every property transfer involving occupied housing to include notice in 6 languages. "Paper should remember everyone," she said. For our 20th anniversary, Nico tried to reserve a famous restaurant. I took him to the bakery after closing and served soup with the first loaf I baked that morning. He placed his gold watch on the counter, the same one he offered when he entered starving. "Will this pay the anniversary bill?" Still no. "The interest terms here are criminal. You married management." He asked whether I regretted feeding him that first night. I considered the vault, the poisoned roll, the bullet, the trials, and the years of cooperative meetings that made warfare seem simple. "I regret that I gave you the good soup before knowing whether you washed your hands." He laughed, then grew serious. "You fed me when you thought I owned nothing. Hunger did not ask for your financial statement. And you loved me after learning I owned too much. Only after you learned to let go." The chubby baker's greatest gift was never the ability to turn flour into something warm. It was knowing that feeding people did not mean surrendering the table. Dana understood that records could shelter a family long after a voice was silenced. My father understood that a recipe could preserve a map when official paper lied. Ivy understood that inheritance was not permission to repeat betrayal, and Nico, who once believed the whole street belonged to him, finally understood why the only home worth defending was one whose doors could not be locked by a single owner. On winter mornings, I still opened before sunrise. The first customer was often a stranger short on money. I gave them bread, asked no questions, and accepted no gold watches. Above the counter hung the brass token, a copy of the trust deed, and a small sign Ivy wrote, "Mercy is free. Ownership requires a meeting." The sign became famous enough that tourists photographed it without understanding the meeting part. One influencer offered $50,000 to franchise Dana's record across the country. The cooperative listened, asked questions, and voted no, because the contract would let a corporation own Ivy's name and my father's folds. Nico did not interfere. He sat in the back with one vote, the same as the apprentice who had worked there 6 months. Afterward, he admitted the old version of him would have taken the money before anyone finished reading page 2. "The old version of you also thought instant coffee counted as breakfast," I said. "Some crimes cannot be forgiven." We did eventually open a second bakery, but only after workers there formed their own cooperative and trained in Bellflower's kitchen. On opening morning, a young baker stared at my body and asked whether the long hours ever made me want to become healthier. Ivy nearly threw him into a flour bin. I stopped her and asked the man whether he had tasted the bread. He had not. "Then you are judging the baker before checking the work," I said. He apologized after his third slice. I did not need every stranger to admire my shape. I needed them to learn that competence, generosity, and courage did not arrive in a single approved package. When Nico and I grew old, we moved into a small apartment directly above the ovens. The smell woke him before dawn, and he complained every morning with suspicious consistency. Our grandchildren believed he had always been a gentle man who swept flour and lost arguments to grandmothers. We told them enough of the truth to understand that people can change, but change is not a speech. It is the ownership surrendered. The order not given the meeting, attended the apology, repeated through action. One snowy night, the power failed across the neighborhood. The community oven stayed warm, and families gathered around it with blankets, soup, and flashlights. I saw 14-year-old apprentices serving strangers without asking who could pay. Nico squeezed my hand. "You built an empire," he whispered. "No," I said. "We built a kitchen." Empires require borders and obedience. Kitchens require heat, labor, and room at the table. I knew which one would outlive us.